everything as peaceful and civil as possible. Oral questions. We have another point of order.
Mr. Speaker,
normally we don't do point of orders now, but the honourable member for Sault Ste. Marie has something. Is it a quick intervention?
Yes, just very point of clarification. I was wearing a tie under the sweater with the coat over it.
That's fine.
As in the past, this was the exact tie I was wearing. I resign. I think if you look closely, you would actually see the tie. Just for
okay, order. Should be fine. Now we'll get to business. Oral questions. Question orale, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, we now know the government's first vaccine deal with Chinese pharmaceutical giant CanSino fell apart almost immediately after the Prime Minister announced it. It only took a week for the Chinese state to stop the necessary material from being exported to Canada so research and production could happen. It was the only leading vaccine that the Liberal government was pushing to be made in Canada. Why did it take the government 3 months to admit that the CanSino deal had fallen apart?
The Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, from the very beginning, we knew that signing deals for vaccines with as many different companies as possible was going to be the best way of ensuring that Canadians made it through this pandemic. That's exactly what we did. We signed a record number of vaccine deals with potential vaccine makers, and that's why we now have more vaccine doses potentially per person than anyone else. Yes, we cast the net very wide. Some of the deals didn't work out, including the CanSino, but we secured doses, early doses for Canadians through the deals we did agree to.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The Prime Minister says he cast the net wide. Well, Providence Therapeutics is a Canadian company that has been part of the COVID-19 vaccine race. They submitted a proposal to the Liberal government in April for a vaccine. They didn't hear back, Mr. Speaker, until August, the same time the government rolled out Pfizer and Moderna, who would not make vaccines in Canada. After months of global hoarding of PPE and supply issues in the first wave of the campaign, why did the Liberal government abandon the chance to make a vaccine here in Canada?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I think most Canadians understand that what was incredibly important during this pandemic was to make our decisions informed by the recommendations of our top scientists and health officers and medical professionals, and that's what we did. We followed the advice of the Vaccine Task Force on who to sign deals with and how to move forward, but I'm very pleased to highlight that we've actually given $10 million to Providence Therapeutics for them to commence their clinical trials to support Made in Canada solutions as well. But science has guided us every step of the way.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, the Prime Minister waited 5 months to even respond to a Canadian company that could make the vaccine here. And months are an eternity in the worldwide race for vaccines. In June, the National Research Council told committee that the CanSino agreement was still going ahead. In July, the government told CTV that the vaccine, the CanSino, was going to be produced in Canada. The government was negotiating with other manufacturers while all this was going on. Why didn't the government get the right to produce any of these vaccines in Canada when the Prime Minister knew that the CanSino deal was dead?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Again, Mr. Speaker, this government based our decisions on the best recommendations of the top scientists and experts in vaccinations and epidemiology across the country to make the right decisions. That guided us every step of the way. Yes, we looked to sign deals with as many different companies as possible to ensure that we'd get the vaccines as they started.
Out of 10 during this pandemic to support Canadians, and we will continue to do so.
Delays in the vaccine mean that more people will get infected and sadly more people will die. Experts have said one of the worst transmissions, one of the biggest transmissions of COVID-19 happen in workplaces. Experts also agree that one of the best tools we have to stop the spread of COVID-19 in workplaces is paid sick leave. So will the Prime Minister commit to making the existing federal program that we fought for broader, easier to access to protect workers and their communities.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we were pleased to bring forward paid sick leave for workers who aren't covered by their workplace. We were happy to have the support of all parties in the House to do just that, and we will continue to work with provinces and territories to ensure that every worker gets the right protection. We have done an awful lot from the federal level and are always looking to do more, but we also know that there are many things that we should be doing in partnership with the provinces, and look forward to continuing to work with vaccines as they start to arrive for Canadians, and that's exactly what we're doing. We had a strong and aggressive plan to do that, and we're delivering for Canadians.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Actually, there's no deliveries for Canadians this week, Mr. Speaker. L'approvisionnement européen des vaccins avec...
The European agreement or for delivery of European vaccines with Pfizer and Moderna is raising concerns for Canada. There is vaccine protectionism going on here. And ultimately, there is a price war happening with fierce competition on a global scale. Has this Prime Minister picked up the phone to call European leaders to ensure that our vaccines will be delivered? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Yes, Mr. Speaker. An hour ago, I spoke to Ursula von der Leyen, President of the European Commission, to raise our concerns. We are all looking forward to receiving the vaccine doses that we bought under that contract. And I was reassured to hear that the transparency measures taken by Europe will not affect Pfizer and Moderna deliveries to Canada. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Mr. Speaker, Canadians are frustrated and they are concerned about the issues with vaccine deliveries. In fact, their anxiety is reaching a high level with the new variants of COVID. Canadians deserve better, Mr. Speaker. When will this Prime Minister take action and tell Canadians the truth on the real vaccine delivery dates? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I find it a bit disturbing to hear the leader of the opposition play petty politics and suggest that we are not telling Canadians the truth. On the contrary, from the very beginning, we have shown rigor and transparency. We have been sharing all of our dates and projections that we receive from the vaccine companies with the provinces and territories. We will continue to be transparent. If the
Calgary Nose Hill.
Canada is receiving 0 doses of COVID-19 vaccines this week, even though other countries are getting plane loads of them. Last night, the Minister of Procurement said that Canada has the right to sue companies that break vaccine contracts with us. So is the Prime Minister planning on suing any company for failing to deliver much-needed vaccines to Canada, or did he negotiate such bad terms that he doesn't have a leg to stand on?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
I'm happy to correct the member from Calgary Nose Hill. The contract and the expectations for the Pfizer vaccine is to receive 4 million doses by the end of February, and we are very much, end of March. We are very much on track for that. Yes, there is a temporary disruption because they are improving the factory in Belgium that produces our vaccines, but within a few weeks, they'll be sending us more even than the hundreds of thousands we were receiving before, and we will be on track to fulfill all those responsibilities we laid out for Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Nose Hill.
Well, I'm happy to correct the Prime Minister. We actually received 8% of what he said we would receive last month in the same period. So it's really one or the other. He either negotiated an ironclad contract that would allow us to have recourse and get vaccines, or he completely failed. We don't have any recourse, and the rest of the world is getting vaccines, and we aren't. Which one is it?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I was pleased to speak with the heads of Pfizer, Moderna, and AstraZeneca over the past few days, and I can assure you that Canada is very much on track to continuing to receive doses of vaccines for Canadians. We are on track to getting more than 3 million Canadians vaccinated by the end of Q1, as we said from the very beginning, and we will have all Canadians who want to be vaccinated by September of 2021. That is us delivering on the commitment we made to Canadians that we'd have their backs.
L'honorable député de Louis Saint-Laurent.
The honourable member for Louis Saint-Laurent. Mr. Speaker, in September, this government introduced a 50-page bill at the last minute, and we had to get it adopted within a single day. And the result of that is that there are some issues with the legislation. For example, giving $1,000 to Canadians coming back from non-essential travel, which makes no sense. We need to correct that. And yesterday I tabled the motion to enable the government to introduce a bill that would fix this problem immediately. But unfortunately, this government refused. Why is this Prime Minister refusing to work with us in a constructive, cooperative manner to fix this scandal? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we tabled a motion for unanimous consent in the House of Commons in order to improve and fix this loophole in the bill. A bill which, as my colleague said, was adopted by all members in this House. Unfortunately, the Conservatives did not want to give unanimous consent to fix the issue right away. We will continue to work with parties in the House to fix this problem as quickly as possible. Because no, indeed, those coming back from non-essential travel should not be able to access that money, and we will correct the situation with or without the Conservative support. The honourable member for Louis Saint-Laurent. We all know that the Prime Minister doesn't like working with the House of Commons, but that's the issue. He introduced the bill in September. We just had one day to debate it, and that's why there are problems. And then now we're being told to just we're being told that we should just accept a new piece of legislation, just pass it without any debate. No, that would just be to make the same mistake again. Once again, pass it in a hurry and make mistakes. We simply want to debate the bill properly. Why not introduce a new bill right after a question period so that we can all debate it, work on it, and vote in favor of it? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Once again, we often hear this type of thing from the Conservatives. We're being told that we helped Canadians too quickly. We reacted too quickly. We were too generous towards senior students, workers. Mr. Speaker, during this pandemic, we made a simple promise to Canadians that we would be there to help them in whatever way necessary, for as long as is necessary, and that's exactly what we're doing. Indeed, when we're working quickly to help everyone, we do need to make corrections. And that is why we are fixing some gaps that no one in any of the parties noticed when we first passed this bill. The honourable member for La Prairie. Mr. Speaker, we know that Pfizer will not be delivering vaccines from Europe this week. We also know that Pfizer is producing vaccines in Michigan, just across the border. But Pfizer cannot sell these vaccines to Quebecers or Canadians because of a decree passed by President Trump. But we also know that Joe Biden is the president now. And the Prime Minister spoke to President Biden only last Friday. Did he ask the President for an exception to this decree for Canada to compensate for the lack of European vaccines? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, it was a real pleasure to speak with Joe Biden. Last week, we spoke about vaccination, the vaccine supply, and what we can do together as partners to keep our citizens safe during the COVID pandemic. And in order to vaccinate everyone as quickly as possible, we will continue to work with our American friends in order to do everything that's necessary to help Canadians and everyone as quickly as possible. The honourable member for La Prairie. Mr. Speaker, we have a real problem. Canada is not producing vaccines. The US is not supplying us with any, and Europe is threatening to stop. Now, we just learned that the Prime Minister spoke with the European Commission, but that doesn't reassure me at all. He could have spoken to the American government. He could have complained that the Americans canceled Keystone. They're going to shove Buy American down our throats. He could have asked them to compensate by sending us some vaccines to compensate for the lack of vaccines from Europe. That's what you call the art of negotiation. Will this Prime Minister finally wake up and make sure that Canadians get the vaccine? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we've been working with a difficult administration in the U.S. for 4 years. But we nonetheless defended supply management, cultural exemptions, steel and aluminum workers, even in difficult protectionistic situations with the former administration. We are working in a positive manner together on COVID and climate change with the new American administration. And we will continue to be very close in everything that we do to ensure
the interconnectedness and the opportunity for us to work together to create good jobs in the energy sector and indeed across our economies by working together in North America. And that's exactly what we're going to do.
Well, Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, thousands of jobs in Ontario depend on the operation of Enbridge's Line 5. In November, the Governor of Michigan decided to revoke the easement, and this has allowed this pipeline to operate safely for decades. Line 5 was not mentioned in the Prime Minister's readout of his call with President Biden last week or his call with John Kerry last night. Why hasn't Line 5 specifically, the thousands of jobs, the decades of a safe track record, why hasn't that been a priority for this Prime Minister?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I think all Canadians know that consistently this government has stood up for Canadian interests with a challenging situation south of the border over the past 4 years. We defended our steel and aluminum workers. We defended our supply management. We protected our most important trading relationship by renegotiating and even improving NAFTA. And we are going to continue to work to ensure energy security, jobs for Canadians, and the fight against climate change close hand in hand with the American government.
The Honourable Member for Kelowna Lake Country.
Mr. Speaker, President Biden's new Buy America executive order contains much tougher rules than we've ever seen before, all but shutting out Canadian businesses from U.S. government contracts. The Canadian Chamber of Commerce says this will have a chilling effect on businesses and jobs. The Liberals failed to negotiate Canada's participation in Chapter 13 of CUSMA, which addresses government procurement. The Liberals' trade failures just keep piling up. Is the Prime Minister negotiating Buy America exemptions for Canadian businesses?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, over the past 4 years, we saw one of the most protectionistic administrations the United States has ever had, and we were able consistently to defend Canadian interests, to stand up for Canadian workers, and to ensure our continued access to the American market and free trade. We will continue to work with this new administration in much more positive ways to be able to defend Canadian jobs and interests. I highlighted our concerns with Buy American directly to the President, and he committed that we would work together to ensure that we're creating jobs and prosperity for both of our countries.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, in this pandemic, we're hitting record cases. Canadians are worried, and they think there's no plan when zero vaccines come and the weeks say we'll receive an unknown amount. The Prime Minister is suggesting we're misleading Canadians when we ask questions on the very documents they're presenting from our health motion last fall that he opposed. Questions about CanSino, questions about failures to deliver what he promised last month. The Prime Minister prorogued Parliament, has kept contracts hidden, and has not released documents to allow us to do better. Last month, he promised vaccines, and we're only going to receive 8%. Will he apologize to Canadians for dropping the ball on vaccines?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, while the Conservatives yet again try and score cheap political points, we are focused on delivering for Canadians. That's why we have delivered over 1 million vaccines to the provinces and territories, while hundreds of thousands of Canadians, vulnerable Canadians, have been vaccinated, why we continue to work with vaccine companies around the world to get those deliveries of vaccines to Canada. We will be receiving hundreds of thousands of Pfizer doses in just a few weeks, more than we had before, so we can deliver what we promised to Canadians.
Honourable member for Victoria.
Mr. Speaker, over the holidays, the government sent anxiety-inducing letters to close to 500,000 Canadians, most of whom applied for CERB in good faith, some who were given incorrect information by the government, a government who's now threatening to make them pay back thousands of dollars in the middle of a pandemic. At the same time, this Prime Minister refuses to make companies like Imperial Oil, who took the wage subsidy, then handed out millions to their shareholders and CEOs, pay back a single cent. Why are the Liberals going after Canadians who are struggling, who did nothing wrong, but refusing to hold their corporate friends accountable?
Okay.
There's no translation. We have a problem with the interpretation. Let me look.